Greetings, Class 702. Today we are discussing behavioral therapy, which in the line of things is kind of the third grouping, if you will. The first being psychoanalytic, the second being existential, and the third now being behavioral. For the next couple sessions between behavioral therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy, we'll be talking a lot more about a specific kind of therapy that is both grouped into the behavioral category. And obviously, we'll be paying attention to a lot of behaviors, actual things that we can observe with our eyes and with our senses to determine what might be going on with an individual as part of their psyche. When I talk about behaviorism, of course, I'm talking about the work of B.F. Skinner and Albert Bandura. Just a little bit about Skinner before we move on. He was born in 1904, passed away in 1990. He was a PhD at Harvard. He's considered the father of behaviorism. And he focused on the emphasis and effects of the environment on the behavior. Once again, what's going on and how it affects an individual, and actually how they show what they're going through, aka their behavior. He is a determinist. That means he does not believe in free choice. He believes that we have very limited options in the way that we respond. He's certainly a fan of cause and effect. Something happens, and there's a reaction, action-reaction kind of individual. He said that too much attention was given to the internal states of the mind, which can't be changed directly. He says we can directly change behavior, but we cannot always change kind of our filters and the cognitions and the kind of things that we talk about in psychoanalysis and existential theories. He's not interested in those things, he says, because those kind of things are not very tangible, and we cannot see any observable changes with those kind of things. Obviously, like a lot of scientists, because he does believe in observing things, he spent a lot of time in the laboratory. Later on in his life, he applied his work to teaching, to managing, to human problems, and social planning. And again, he was a big scientist and believed in the power of technology and learning about ourselves. So what is behavioral therapy? Behavioral therapy focuses on observable behavior, things that we can actually see and we can chart down, aka an observable behavior is I threw a punch, or I screamed at the top of my lungs, or I had a particular reaction. These kind of things are oftentimes jotted down scientifically, monitored, if you will. We are concerned with the current deterministics of behavior. What is causing the behavior, aka what are the triggers? What kind of things are setting these behaviors off? What kind of environmental factors are causing these behaviors? We are interested in these things as learning experiences so that we can observe them, point them out, learn from them, and hopefully make a change due to that knowledge that we have now observed the behavior and charted it. Oftentimes in behavioral therapy, we are tailoring treatment plans to the individual. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what is in that treatment plan and how one should design it. Being that it's very scientific in nature, it requires a lot of evaluation and reevaluation. Again, the studies, the actual time to take in monitoring these kind of things and charting these kind of things and making sure that everything is kind of chronicled. It's data so that we can assess the data and hopefully make changes from it. Behavioral therapy is used to treat anxiety, depression, substance abuse, eating disorders, domestic abuse, sexual problems, pain management, and hypertension. In regards to all of these things, all of these negative things, we are concerned with the behaviors that are exhibited through depression, and the behaviors that we show when we are anxious, or the behaviors that we show when we are being domestically abusive, for example. In the 1950s, 1960s is when this first kind of started to bubble up, and it was a reaction against psychoanalysis. What happened was Pavlov and a couple of other individuals were beginning to use classical and operant conditioning, which we'll describe in a little bit, to explain behaviors. And hey, why not? What works with a dog, we can easily apply to a human being. So we started using conditioning techniques in order to change behavior. We're going to talk a little bit about that in the future. In the 1960s, Bandura took a step further, and he created the social learning theory, which looks at classical and operant conditioning, which we're going to talk about, plus observational learning, ways that we can kind of incorporate cognition into this a little bit, and incorporate the mind. Before, Skinner was just concerned with behavior. In this case, we're also concerned with the mind, and we're going to talk about how he described that. So what is classical conditioning? Many of you guys may know it as respondent conditioning. It's involuntary. It's automatic. It's when I go like that, did you flinch? Did you blink? Those kind of responses that happen automatically. The classic case is Pavlov's dog, where a dog would smell food or see food, and the dog would begin to salivate because it's ready to eat. What began happening is they changed the things around a little bit, and every time they presented the food, they would ring a bell, and then the dog would salivate. But after a while, all they needed to do was just ring the bell, and the dog would salivate. So it became a response to the bell. This respondent conditioning, this classical conditioning, can be used to change one's behavior. In this particular case, to change the behavior of the dog so that it began salivating, not when it saw the food, but when it heard the ringing of the bell. This can be used also in other ways. It can be used in the sense of systemic desensitization. For example, with fear. If you constantly expose someone to, let's say, a spider over and over and over again, perhaps they would no longer fear the spider. So you're kind of exposing them to something and kind of having a reaction. And hopefully, with more and more experience with something, there's less and less of that fear reaction. But it can be applied to behavior as well. Behavioral therapy kind of skims over classical conditioning because it is so automatic. But they are very concerned about the second phase, which is operant conditioning, which is that behaviors are influenced by consequences. Whatever we do, and when I say we do, we act. Our actions are because of consequences. Or our non-actions, the things that we don't do, are because of consequences. I would give a girlfriend flowers because I know the consequences are some sort of returning love, if you will. Or I wouldn't rob a bank because I know that the consequences is jail. So he says that oftentimes people act and behave according to operant conditioning. If something brings rewards or destroys adversity, then the behavior will be repeated. Let me repeat that. If something brings rewards or destroys adversity, destroys some bad things in your life, then that behavior will be repeated. That makes sense. If you do the right thing over and over again, and well, I guess what makes it the right thing is that you're getting some sort of reward for it. You know that when you're a child and you begin saying please and thank you, you get a better response from your parents or your grandparents or whomever. So there's a reward factor there. And we learn these things, and we might not consciously register it, but we recognize ways to change our behavior so that they bring us rewards. Or we recognize ways to change our behavior so that they get rid of negative things. Right now it's kind of blanking me what my primary example was. But there's certain things that you can do to kind of get things that are harmful to your life out of the picture. There's certain kinds of operant conditioning. There's positive and negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcement would be something like a reward. You got straight A's, your behavior was doing your homework, and you got straight A's for that, and the reward is a $20 bill. Negative reinforcement would be the addition of something negative. So let's say you did a behavior or didn't do a behavior. Let's say in this particular case you didn't do your homework, which is a behavior. And the negative reinforcement would be adding something that is not helpful to your life. So maybe adding a chore that you now need to do. Another form of operant conditioning is punishment. Punishment is pretty clear. If you do the wrong behavior, there will be negative consequences. There will be some sort of either taking away of something or imposing of something negative on one's life. This is the consequence for behavior. Just for the record, Skinner recommended positive reinforcement as a vital motivator for change, more than negative reinforcement and punishment. Praising somebody, letting them know what they do right, rewarding them are all ways to kind of help establish a change. For some reason, wagging the finger does not count as much as patting someone on the back. So let's keep that in mind, because it's very easy to point out flaws, but it's not as easy to compliment somebody. Especially when someone's doing something wrong all the time. And I might give you kind of a strange example, but someone who's an addict, a drug addict, might have someone waving the finger at them over and over and over again their entire lives. This is wrong, this is bad for society, this is bad for you, this is bad for your family, blah, 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 blah. It goes on and on, that wagging of the finger. But maybe there's times when this person can be complimented as well. And maybe it's even such a small thing as, oh, congratulations that you didn't smoke crack this afternoon, okay? Maybe something as small as a time period where they were doing the right thing. Or congratulations that you resisted with your cocaine habit for a week. Oftentimes it's overlooked, that those kind of steps of progress, and Skinner is definitely saying that the data supports that positive reinforcement. Those acknowledgments of those good things are more helpful than some of the negative consequences. Bandura took behavioral therapy to the next level with the social learning approach, also sometimes referred to as the social cognition approach. And what it is it's triadic. It's a triangle, and it's how these three points in the triangle influence each other. And it's the environment, everything that's around us, an individual's behavior, and the personal factors of that individual. Their beliefs, their preferences, their expectations of life, and their self-perception. So an individual's personal factors influence an individual's behavior, which influences the environment, which in turn influences their personal factors. So there's this kind of thing going on at all times, and it can even go the other way. It doesn't really matter. Where the environment, the individual's behavior, and their personal factors are all coming into play, so that they're constantly affecting not only your own individual behavior, but also your thoughts and the environment. This triad of the social learning approach is meant to explain how all these things are constantly in flux and constantly connected. What we're trying to do is work on having our clients become self-efficient and also self-directive, so that they can learn for themselves how to change their behaviors. But oftentimes they need to see their behaviors, number one, and they need to see how and what is influencing their behaviors, the environment, if you will, and also some of their personal factors. Obviously, adapting to the environment is important here because at times that's a method for survival. And if we don't adapt, then we'll get run over. There'll be negative consequences for our insufficient behavior.